It's a moment no child should ever have to witness. Police say a father was run over by a car while his children watched helplessly. Investigators say the driver was their own mother. Now that father is gone and their mother is behind bars, possibly facing life in prison. According to Birmingham police, the man was pinned underneath the car as family members stood by powerless. His final moments were filled with pain and witnessed by the people he loved most. The woman accused of killing him appeared in court, smiling and laughing. I'm Kennedi Walker, and I'll walk you through the details. Dressed in a green and white striped jumpsuit with braids only on one side of her head, the other side seemingly shaved or possibly ripped out, 30-year-old Shatice Renae Jackson stood before a judge. She's now charged with capital murder after Birmingham police say she ran over the father of her children in front of them. It all happened on Easter Sunday. That day, Mickese Bostic was hosting a celebration, Easter and his daughter's 7th birthday. Police say Bostic's longtime girlfriend and mother of his 2 children, Shatice Jackson, killed him by slamming her SUV into him, pinning him between the vehicle and his own home. According to investigators, the couple had been arguing throughout the day. Officers were actually called earlier on a domestic disturbance, but after talking to both parties, police say nothing criminal had taken place, so they left. But Jackson allegedly did not stay away for long. Authorities say she returned later that night and the argument escalated. Witnesses say she pulled a gun, shots were fired, though it's still unclear if she shot into the air or at someone. And then things took a fatal turn. Witnesses told police Jackson got behind the wheel of her SUV and ran Bostic over. Their children may have seen everything. Officers rushed to the scene around 10 p.m. and what they found was chaos. With around 50 people at the party, police called a, quote, max emergency because they say they couldn't control the crowd. More than 25 police units responded from 4 different precincts. Birmingham Fire and Rescue arrived as well, trying to save Bostic, but it was too late. He died at the scene. Bostic's sister, Catherine Bostic, spoke with AL.com. She described the scene as awful, saying family members tried desperately to save her brother, but couldn't. She claims the couple's children were inside the vehicle when their father was run over. Now, this is a crucial detail because under Alabama law, if intent is proven and a child witnesses the killing of their parent or guardian, the crime can rise to capital murder. After the incident, Jackson was arrested and booked into the Birmingham City Jail. She was placed on a 48-hour felony hold and charged with capital murder. In court, Jackson appeared to smile, at one point even seeming to laugh. As for the children, police say they were not physically harmed and they are now in police custody. Bostic's family says while their hearts are broken, they'll carry his memory with them forever, and they're determined to live in a way that honors him. So joining me to talk more about this story is legal expert Derek Drennan. Derek, thank you so much for joining me today. Let's just jump right in. If convicted, what kind of sentence is Jackson realistically facing?
Well, if convicted of the charged offense, then she would be looking at life without the possibility of parole and the possibility of a death sentence. But there are also the possibilities of convictions to lesser offenses, such as non-capital murder or manslaughter as well, which would carry somewhat lower sentences.
And what are the key differences between, capital murder and first degree murder? Because we know that she's been charged with the capital murder since they're alleging that the children were present.
Yes, I mean the main difference is that the legislature has identified some 40 odd circumstances under which an intentional murder can be charged as a capital crime. So those offenses, the sentence is life without parole. And then there is an aggravating circumstance that, if it's available and proven beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury, can be used to enhance a life without parole sentence to the death sentence. Basically, any intentional murder. The legislature has identified specific characteristics among those which will be treated differently. And then, even among capital murder convicts, there's a smaller subset of them who are eligible for consideration for the death penalty. So, for example, one of the types of cases where you rarely see a death penalty sentence is a capital offense where the person is, or a vehicle is involved. So the legislature, I don't know, 25 years ago or so, decided that if you shoot somebody from a car, within a car, outside a car, into a car, that is a capital case. But rarely are those cases lead to a death penalty, because rarely is there another provable circumstance that would trigger a death penalty sentence.
So in this case, because she was in the car, or that's what she's accused of, uh, she probably will not face
Well,
the death
no,
penalty
to
if
be
convicted.
clear, uh, the car example may have not been the best one for this example, because it's not using the car as the means to cause death. It's just that the shooting into or from or within a car. In this instance, it's a capital case, as I understand it, because the children under 14 were witnesses to their parent being murdered. And that is the circumstance that's triggered this to be a capital offense. Um, so if she were convicted, they would then have to prove a aggravating circumstance to the satisfaction of the jury beyond a reasonable doubt, for them to consider whether or not she should or shouldn't be sentenced to death. Probably the most likely one in this case would be heinous, atrocious, and cruel. So that, let's say that she pinned the man against the wall, and he's, screaming and hollering, and she just keeps hitting the accelerator. That could arguably be heinous, atrocious, and cruel, as opposed to, you know, hitting him at 55 miles an hour and instant, causing instant, death. So um, those are just kind of the vagaries. I would imagine in this case that the defense is going to be looking into what were the circumstances that led up to this. In other words, is there anything that would suggest that maybe that was a heat of passion, manslaughter type, circumstance,
Right.
or if she was.
Could Jackson face any additional charges for the use of the firearm, even if no one was hit? Because police in the report, they're claiming that people heard gunshots and things of that nature, but they don't know if the shot was in the air or anything like that. So could she face any charges for that?
She certainly could, and that would just be based on the evidence that they have. And I don't know what I mean. It may be that the only witness to the shooting inside the house is no longer with us, and that's why those charges haven't been brought. I don't know.
Can the children be called as witnesses?
Absolutely.
And can you just explain that? Let's say, I'm just concerned, could they potentially be re-traumatized? Would the prosecution potentially try to do this case without them, or most likely they will be called if they did witness what happened?
Well, that's going to be a decision made by the district attorney's office. It's certainly possible that it's so indisputable. Maybe there's one eldest child. Maybe there was somebody out. As I understand it, the children were in the car. Maybe there's someone outside the car that can testify to everything. I don't know, but certainly uh, whether or not children will be traumatized or re-traumatized is a concern in any case. And if it can be avoided, um, everybody tries to make an effort to avoid that. So,
Now there's video of Jackson in court. She appears to be smiling. Some even could consider it laughing. Could her courtroom behavior, if this continues, like the smiling, impact the jury's perception at all?
well, presumably, the jury selection process would probably root out anybody who expresses familiarity with any of those circumstances, the media and whatnot. So, um, I would imagine that the people who sit and hear the case will at least have told the judge probably that they aren't familiar with any of that media coverage. So, not that
What
that would
happens?
exclude them necessarily, but the defense would probably try to um, use their peremptory strikes to get rid of jurors like that.
Right. What happens if Jackson is found mentally unfit to stand trial?
If she's deemed to be mentally incompetent, which is an extremely difficult bar to cross, very, very few people are mentally incompetent to stand trial. I always compare it to is your client a pumpkin? Because that's about the functioning level that you've got to have to expect a judge to say that this person just can't proceed. But if that were to happen, then typically they would be hospitalized until a determination was made that they had been restored to competency, or a determination has been made that they can never be restored to competency. And if the determination is made that the person can never be restored to competency, then it just becomes a question of, is the person a danger to the community, whether or not they will remain in that hospitalization status or not.
The suspect was put under a 48-hour felony hold. Can you explain what that is and what happens during that time?
That's it's pretty standard. Anytime somebody's charged with a serious felony, they'll do a 48-hour investigative hold. A lot of times, what they're trying to do during that period is to get the person to make a statement. That obviously makes the prosecution a lot easier if the defendant waives their Miranda rights and tells their side of things. And that can be extended for another 24 hours upon request. But after 72 hours, then the person has to be brought before a judge and told what their charges are and told whether or not they do or do not have a bond, et cetera.
What determines or who determines where the children go after a parent is charged with murder, right? So dad is, unfortunately, he's passed away. Mom is in jail. What happens with the kids?
Well, I mean, initially that would be a family decision. So if there is somebody who is willing, capable, and able to take care of the kids, um, that grandmother and aunt, I mean, they'd be able to do that. Where it would get tricky is if there were not anybody willing to take that responsibility. So then you would have the Department of Human Resources get involved in foster care and all that sort of thing.
Now, family members describe the scene as extremely chaotic. So many police officers came out. Family members are saying, there was crying and screaming, all of this going on during the time. What challenges do prosecutors face when just relying on emotional witness accounts?
Accuracy and consistency probably between the witnesses. And so, anytime somebody's observing something emotional and chaotic, their perceptions can be impacted quite a bit by that. And so, um, our memories aren't as accurate as we'd like to think that they are.
What kind of legal strategy might the defense use in a case like this? If you were the suspect's defense attorney, how would you be handling it?
Well, I think we've touched on a couple of them. One would be, were there any circumstances that a reasonable person might have sympathy or empathy for how she, reacted? So, um, maybe he was, leaving her. Maybe um, he gave her a venereal disease. I mean, you can think of circumstances under which she would just get so angry to do something that without that information just sounds unhinged. but there may be a broader story. I don't know what that might be. Something happened. The question is going to be, is it helpful? And I don't know. If it is, then I would imagine that you would be, defense trying to argue for manslaughter and hoping that those circumstances were compelling enough for a jury not to convict of the most serious charges of capital murder. And, and it sounds like a case that, might be able to be settled because a lot of the victims probably don't want their mother to go away forever, So they may have influence on the district attorney's office to come up with something that is only punishment and severe punishment, but not, ultimate sanction of the death penalty or life without any possibility of parole ever. Yeah. I'm sure the defense is also looking to see whether or not there are any mental health issues. Of course, now I don't know that she has any defense at all, but once she does, any representation at all, but once she does, I mean, those issues would be one certainly that ought to be being explored. Yeah.
According to the documents, it says that the suspect and the victim, they were arguing throughout the day. The suspect allegedly left, and then she came back, and then allegedly another argument took place, and then that's how everything unfolded. Could that be considered premeditated? The fact that she came back, or not really?
Well, I mean, certainly it could. I just don't know enough about it to say. I mean, how much of a delay was there between when she came back and when this final incident took place? I don't know. Those are going to be all very fast, specific inquiries. And certainly, whatever the situation was, the longer she had to calm down and come to this, the harder it's going to be to argue for manslaughter. Yeah. So,
what is the typical timeline for a case like this to go to trial?
I wouldn't say there's really very much of a typical time frame. Cases can have considerably different timelines, but I would say if you were looking for an average, I'd probably say about 2 years.
2 years, and so from now, we know she had her first court appearance. We know she had her first court appearance. From what happens from that point?
Okay, the case is set in front of District Judge Bell. So the first determination is going to be, are they going to have a preliminary hearing? The courts here have historically, all preliminary hearings have been held in district court, but on serious cases, they have had circuit court judges do preliminary hearings. So that's going to be the first thing: is there a preliminary hearing on? And it's just a question of probable cause. Is there probable cause to believe that an offense was committed and that the defendant committed it? It's a good opportunity for defense counsel to find out answers to questions they might have about the case, to prepare themselves for the next level. But those district court proceedings are going to have to happen, and they'll either have a preliminary hearing, a probable cause hearing, or counsel will waive the right to have that hearing, and it will be bound over to await the action of the grand jury. Typically, that's about a 4 to 6 month process. The grand jury is obviously going to indict in a case like this, and then it's set in circuit court, and that's where pleas and jury trials take place.
Great. Well, this is a case that we will definitely be following closely. Derek, thank you so much for coming on today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Jackson is currently in custody and was not given bond. For Law&Crime, I'm Kennedi Walker.